I want to find the midline, amplitude, and period, and then sketch this cosine graph. So let's find our midline. Well, our midline deals with that last number right there, k. So my midline is going to be y equals -2. My period deals with this number in the front here. There's really like a 1 hiding there, so it's going to be going up and down 1. Let me put the word flip so when we do the graph we know it's upside down. And the last one is the period. Well, the period deals with this number right here, but it's 2 pi divided by that number. So when I reduce that, I get 2. So my midline is that piece. My amplitude is a number in front. Negative means it's upside down. And this creates my period. And because sine and cosine at normal periods 2 pi, we take this fraction of 2 pi. So these pieces help us graph it. First thing I want to do is let's label our x-axis. So let's put 2 right here, because that's my period. And then I'm going to break this down. That'd be a 1, and I'm going to break it down into my quadrants. So I have nice spots for my graph, because I want 4 breaks like that. All right. Next, I want to put my midline. Our midline's at -2, so I'm going to put -2, let's say, is right here. That's -2. And then my amplitude's 1, so I'm going to go up 1 and down 1. So if my -2 is the middle, right there, and we're going to be going, that's my middle, and we're going to go up and down 1. So I put up and down 1 right there. So that looks like we got all our things, parameters. We got our period, we got our amplitude, we got our middle. So let's sketch a cosine graph that's upside down. So an upside down cosine graph. Well, cosine would start away from the midline, and since it's upside down, we're going to start on the bottom. We would end at the same spot, so we end at the same spot we started. Our middle at 1 would go up the amplitude, so we're going to be right there. And then halfway between, or right here, we're going to hit the midline. So those 5 dots would create my cosine graph. And then I do my little curves to kind of make a cosine graph. Curve it into it, and it would look something like that. Next, we're going to sketch this tangent graph. I don't ask for the midline, amplitude, and period. Actually, it would be a vertical stretch, but they'll help us graph. So I'm going to write them in because they'll help us. So what would be your midline? Well, it should be y equals 0 because there's nothing added at the end. What's our vertical stretch? Because there is no amplitude. Well, your vertical stretch is that number 4. And our period, be careful here, our period is not 2 pi, it's pi divided by 1/3. Remember there's like a 1 hiding right there, and that's a 1/3. And if you do pi divided by 1/3, you get pi times 3/1. So your period is actually 3 pi. Okay, so we have all the pieces we need to graph this. I'm going to put a little line right here and call that our period of 3 pi. I'm then going to put right down the middle, which is 3 pi over 2. And I'm going to break these 2 up as well. There's our breakdown on our x-axis. Now with the tangent graph, you should realize you're always going to have an asymptote right down the middle. So let's just graph that right there. Always got an asymptote smack down the middle, so let's put that in before we go any farther. That's a good one. All right, next. All right, we have our midline is going to be the x-axis, y equals 0. We're going to be going up and down 4. So I'm going to go up 4, down 4. So let's see here. I'm going to put a marking right there and call it 4. A marking right there and call it -4. There we go. And if we think about tangent, tangent uses the dots of sine. So we're going to use some dots from sine. So if I graph sine, I would start right there. I'd end right there. In the middle, you'd be hitting on the asymptote. And then for sine, halfway between here and here, are you going up or down? Well, aren't we going up on a positive, so aren't we going to be there? And halfway between here, we're going to go down. Okay. So that would be what we said down here, and we said up here. Now, we're not going to draw a sine graph through this. How would you graph something that goes through these and goes up against that? Wouldn't it look kind of like this? Okay, so you got a graph that will kind of go like this and be going up towards the asymptote. And the other side, you're going to go through the dots, and you're going to go up, down towards the asymptote. So it looks something like that for a tangent graph. All right, imagine you are playing in the ocean. The waves make the water level go up and down at a constant rate. Assuming at time 0, the water is at its lowest point of 8 feet, and then 2 seconds later, the wave reaches its highest point of 12 feet. If the waves make a sinusoidal function, then write the equation for it. All right, let's draw a picture. A picture is a good way to start these problems. So a picture. Well, I have it like this. Our goal in the end is an equation. I'll draw a little picture to help me out here. Well, for this picture, it says our lowest point is 8 feet, our highest point is 12 feet. Now, I don't need to draw this for scale, because all I want is an equation. The goal is an equation. So I'm not going to really draw it to scale. I'm just going to put, okay, 8 foot and 12 foot. Are you okay? I'm not drawing it to scale. I just want 8 to 12, 8 to 12. I'm okay with that. I'm okay not putting it exact. All right. And for a sketch, well, what's our time frame? Well, it says 2 seconds from low to high. Well, low to high is not a full period. Wouldn't this be 2, so wouldn't the whole thing be 4? If we're going from low to high, wouldn't 2 be halfway? You'll see here in a second when I graph it, because watch. If we said we start at time 0 at 8, if we start here in 2 seconds, aren't you up here? So in 2 more seconds, aren't you back down to there? So the whole period is 4. And hopefully you can see from here, it looks like a cosine graph. Again, this is just a sketch. We're sketching it to help us understand. Now, halfway through, wouldn't that be your midline? What number is that halfway through? Well, hopefully you can see that is a 10. If you can't see that's 10, well, what you do is you take the high plus the low and average it. When you do that, you get 10. If you average the high and low, you can calculate it, or you just kind of eyeball it. So we now have all the pieces we need to make an equation. Let's list them out first. Our midline. Well, our midline is y equals 10. Our amplitude. Well, we're going up and down 2. Aren't we going up and down 2, which is 2 feet? These are actually feet, but it's just we're just thinking through it because we're trying to make an equation. That's our goal. Our period is 4 seconds. Now, but, to make an equation, we don't want our period, we want our b. To make b, don't you go 2 pi divided by your period, which will end up being pi over 2. So I want an equation. Okay, my equation, what's my equation going to be? It's going to be, okay, y equals, I start with my amplitude, which is a 2. Oh, did you notice your amplitude had a flip to it? Did you notice it was upside down? Shouldn't we make that a negative 2? Because the cosine graph started at the bottom. Normally cosine starts at the top. And by the way, I just said cosine, so we know it's a cosine graph because of the picture. All right, now, which one do we use? Do we use the period or the b? We use the b. So inside, that's going to be pi x over 2. And the last piece is the midline, which would be a plus 10. And that is the equation for this ocean chain.